If you've been bullied in the workplace, you may have CPTSD and not know it. Workplace bullying can be so severe, it can cause CPTSD. There is a lot of information about CPTSD in survivors of narcissistically abusive relationships, I think because there is so much overlap with domestic violence. Not all narcissistically abusive relationships are physically violent. Often the abuse is psychological. But CPTSD is definitely something that we associate with domestic violence. However, in my research about CPTSD, I found next to no information about CPTSD in survivors of this type of abuse in the workplace. CPTSD is also difficult to diagnose because here we go again with the overlap in symptoms. Some of you commented on my last video that CPTSD actually is neurodiversity. However, I don't think that claim is scientifically substantiated, at least not yet. The difference is, it's my understanding that neurodivergence generally originates in childhood. There could be a genetic component and/or it's learned behavior from narcissistic parents. I think CPTSD is something we see more often in adults. Just like neurodiversity or autism, CPTSD is likely to be mistaken for other mental health conditions like bipolar disorder, depression, anxiety, OCD, self-harming behaviors, addictions, eating disorders, or personality disorders, all of which may sometimes be just symptoms of a larger trauma response. We do know that there is similarity between CPTSD and borderline personality disorder. But it still begs the question, what is this? Is this person autistic, or do they have a personality disorder, or do they just have trauma? Even for licensed professional clinicians, it's complicated. We do, however, know for sure two things about psychological abuse. Not only does emotional abuse do more damage than physical violence, yes, it does. It also literally causes brain damage. People who have been bullied show up in brain scans with actual lesions on their brains. I don't want to scare you. The good news is that brain cells have the capacity to regenerate, so you can heal. Again, not a STEM person, but as I understand it, the science is basically that abuse does primarily two things to the brain. It shrinks the hippocampus, which is responsible for learning and memory. At the same time, it enlarges the amygdala, otherwise known as the reptilian brain, which governs all of the negative fear-based emotions, which way back in the Maybach were necessary for our survival, like rage, anger, grief, sorrow, depression, sadness, anxiety, worry, envy, jealousy, guilt, and shame. These changes to the brain are due in part, I think, to an excess of stress hormones, namely cortisol, that trauma generates and that are extremely damaging to not only the brain but also the rest of the physical body. So because of the brain damage, some of the symptoms that people with CPTSD experience are cognitive. Trauma impairs your thinking. So the biggest cognitive response is going to be the flashbacks. You revisit the abuse as though it is happening in real time, even long after the abusers are gone, and you respond accordingly, both emotionally and physically. You feel the same way you did when it happened. You may feel fear, anger, anxiety. You may experience increased heart rate, high blood pressure, and even physical pain, and you may even start sweating, shaking, and crying. Flashbacks may be triggered by some kind of external sensory stimulus. You see or hear something that reminds you of the abuse or the abusers, but not always. Sometimes intrusive thoughts arise seemingly out of the blue, out of nowhere, with no discernible trigger that you can trace to any detectable source. This can happen while you are washing the dishes, or in the shower, or driving, or on the treadmill. The reason bad memories come up seemingly spontaneously is physiological. As I will explain later in the video, Trauma, like all memory, is actually stored in the body, not the brain. So if you find yourself thinking about things from the past for no apparent reason, that is probably because some biological process in your physical body is releasing those memories. Now, what I didn't find in my research about the cognitive manifestations of CPTSD is my own personal sick fantasy about imaginary bullies. I've mentioned this before. Because I'm so used to being bullied absolutely everywhere I go, in the absence of any active bullies, I invent them. I have created this whole elaborate alternate reality, usually in an office setting, with dozens of bullies who are all gangbanging me. I can literally see them. It's like a movie playing in my head. There are these sexually frustrated incels who ridicule me for everything I do, from coughing to biting my nails, because of their pathetic need for attention. There are all the bitchy, catty, trashy, ugly little pick-me mean girls who try to start shit with me. And then there are the jealous cows who try to pull control moves because they want domination and control over me. As I move through my day, I actively feel as though I am being made fun of and insulted for absolutely everything I do, especially eating, even when there's no one in the room with me. And I have created another imaginary scenario that takes place inside a courtroom where I am on the witness stand and I am being interrogated by an abusive defense attorney who is gaslighting me. I obviously have one hell of a persecution complex and feel unfairly judged. This has been going on for about 20 years, ever since my Saturn return, and it increased exponentially after I was bullied out of my last full-time job. I'm not schizophrenic. I am aware at all times that none of this is real. And yes, I do flash back to real people and situations that actually happened. But the bullying that is going down in my imagination is actually doing more damage to my mental health than anything that I actually experienced. When we have flashbacks, we also start ruminating. Ruminating is this negative obsessing that can go on for hours and even days. You feel like a hamster on a wheel, just cycling and recycling through the same repetitive trauma until your frontal lobes are so fried, your face feels like a freaking raccoon. Ruminating lowers your vibration like no other, and it can feel like the closest thing to madness that you have ever experienced. But all of the negative obsessing that I do is actually where I derive a lot of the content that I prepare for you. The reason we descend into the flashbacks and the ruminating is that we are trying to get it right this time. You didn't respond the way you wish you had when it happened. I know you didn't. You know how I know? Because no one did. No one has the smart answers. Literally no one responds to abuse the way that they want to. How could you? Unless you are a highly experienced sociopath with decades of experience, literally no one has the capacity to respond effectively to this shit because it's so fucking insane. I know you wish you had done things differently. You wish you had given them what for, given them a piece of your mind and hit them up style. You may have revenge fantasies. You may give imaginary speeches to your bullies in your head. The truth is, when the abuse happened, you were probably non-responsive. You probably took the high road because in a victim-blaming culture, we are all gaslit to be the bigger person. Believing that we could and should have done differently is part of the self-blame that all abuse survivors experience. If this is you, now is the time to practice self-compassion. You didn't respond the way you wish you had in the moment, and it's okay. I didn't either. None of us did. No one ever does. Join the club, get in line. It's a long line. And if you didn't respond, I know it doesn't feel like it, but you did the right thing. Stooping to their level is exactly what bullies want, and it is very important to never, ever give these people what they want. You know what they say, never wrestle with a pig. Nothing good can come from ever engaging with any of these people. It will only make you feel worse about yourself than you probably already do. Another cognitive symptom of CPTSD is amnesia or blackouts. You may have forgotten part of the abuse, or you may just forget things in general. Some children who grew up in abusive homes report that there's not a lot of their childhood that they can remember. There may be gaps in your memory related to the abuse or not that you just can't quite piece together. A couple of times in my life, friends have mentioned to me past events and expressed shock that I couldn't remember them. Like, Claire, you were right there. There are whole situations and people from my past that I cannot remember in any way at all whatsoever. It's just a black hole in my timeline. The memory problem may also include just everyday generalized forgetfulness. It's the way you can't remember anything. Where are my glasses? I'm looking for my glasses, but they've been on my face the whole time. Or the classic proverbial walking into a room in your home and not being able to remember why you went in there in the first place. You can't buy anything in the grocery store without a list. If you don't write it down, you can't remember it. I have a habit of putting my shirts on inside out and tucking my shirts into my underwear so the underwear band is sticking out over the top of my pants. And yes, I go out into public like that. Just did that the other day. Did you get dressed in the dark? It's supposed to be a joke, but that's literally what I look like. And again, because trauma damages the hippocampus, which is responsible for learning and memory, you may have problems with short-term memory. And again, because trauma damages the hippocampus, which is responsible for learning and memory, you may have problems with short-term memory. Another cognitive symptom of CPTSD is dissociation, and I don't mean full-on DID. This can look like maladaptive daydreaming, staring out the window, staring into space, staring at nothing. You just zone out. You may be thinking about the abuse or something else unrelated, or you may not be thinking at all. You're just checked out, and you may actually lose time dissociating, and this may be another reason that you have lapses in memory. Even when you are interacting with other people, you're never fully present. You always have one foot out the door, so to speak. At this point, it's very difficult to get me to fully engage with anyone, even with my therapist, who I like and respect. I'm always thinking about what I'm going to do next throughout the entire session. People with CPTSD also have problems concentrating. You may have difficulty with concentration and attention. This can look like ADD or ADHD. It's like, how many times am I going to reread the same paragraph over and over again? You have to reread things, you have to rewind videos because you're not processing the information. CPTSD also results in distorted thinking, not full-on schizophrenia. I'm not saying that you go before city council claiming to be the real president of the United States or the Dauphin of Louis XIV. It's not paranoid delusions. But you may, however, have developed some false beliefs about other people, the world, and even yourself. You may have come to believe that the world is a horrible place and everyone in it is evil. You may assume the worst in everyone and everything, everywhere you go. People with trauma can do splitting, which is black or white extremes, all or nothing, like romanticizing or idealizing someone or something and then turning around and vilifying and demonizing them. And you start awfulizing, catastrophizing, and expecting the worst outcome, the worst case scenario with everyone and everything. With everything new in your life, new job, new relationship, anything new. You are always waiting for the other shoe to drop, for it all to go south. Great. I wonder how long it'll take me to fuck this up too. If your friend doesn't immediately text you back, you automatically assume that they ghosted you. Here we go again. Another one bites the dust. They just don't like me. It's okay. I get it. I don't like me either. Oh well. When the truth is, they may have lost cell phone service, their battery died, or their grandmother's in the hospital. And you extend this negative thinking to even yourself. This is probably the worst legacy of abuse. When we first experience trauma, we initially respond to it with fuck ton ego. Oh no, this is not how this is gonna be. You're not gonna do this to me. You can't stop me. I'll show you. You suck. But if the abuse is severe enough and it goes on for long enough, we can't help but buckle under the pressure. As much as we try to protect and defend ourselves, it's just too much to take. You're not superhuman. Although you may not admit it to yourself consciously, on a subconscious level, you may have internalized some of the abuse and, quite frankly, become an abuser to yourself. And that's exactly what abusers want. Part of the function of evil in this world is to get you to carry on its dirty work for it, for two reasons. Number one, if you abuse yourself, the people who abused you can then blame you for what they did to you. It's like a kid who grew up in an abusive home and developed a drug addiction as an adult. I guarantee you his abusers will weaponize his mental health struggles against him so they can absolve themselves. Number two, when you have low self-esteem, you start self-sabotaging, blocking your own blessings, and inviting even more negativity into your life to sort of finish you off, as it were. In a previous video, I mentioned the documentary about Misty Copeland. She's an African-American dancer for ABT, American Ballet Theater. She spoke about bullying in the ballet world, which we all know is about as progressive as the Inquisition, without going into detail. When she was asked how she dealt with it, she said, well, I finally just started to believe it. The abuse may be so intense and it may go on for such a long time that at some point you start blaming yourself. You start singing Taylor Swift's Anti-Hero, I'm the Problem. Survivors of all forms of abuse, especially if the abuse is chronic and repetitive, experience a lot of guilt and shame for what other people did to them. Again, low self-esteem doesn't always happen on a conscious level. Sometimes it does. Some people with low self-esteem verbally berate themselves and call themselves every name in the book with negative self-talk all day, every day. Even if you are not overtly abusing yourself, I bet if you take a close look at the way you live your life, it is not exactly indicative of someone with real self-esteem. So on some level, you may have started to second guess yourself and say to yourself, well, I guess all of these horrible things that other people say about me must be true. The behavioral effects of CPTSD can basically be summed up in one word: avoidance of others and even self. You may go out of your way to avoid humans and choreographed some pretty elaborate avoidance strategies that other people find odd and that may even inspire more ridicule. You may have agoraphobia. You may be the kind of person who cannot walk through the grocery store without something playing through your AirPods to fight off the earthlings. Back in the day, I used to schedule my grocery shopping only once a week. I would go late at night on a Saturday night because I assumed that was when there would be the least amount of people in the store, but I miscalculated because that's actually when all the horny drunks come out. And this avoidance behavior may extend to even people you like and love. When your friends text you, you're not exactly thrilled. It's more like, oh, God, how badly do I want to hang out with that piece of shit? It can take you forever to respond, and it can take the jaws of life to get you out the door. Socializing can feel like your skin is being peeled off. Friends may be dropping like flies. They think you ghosted them, but the truth is you just don't have the bandwidth to maintain relationships. It's like, I hate humanity, I hate the world, I hate life, and I hate myself. I'm just surviving until I fucking die. I'm like this with everyone. Don't take it personal, bro. Also, pain is very isolating, and we're all so used to being gaslit that we start to assume that no one understands or wants to hear any of this shit. We also start imagining preemptively the worst case scenario and assuming that everyone will reject us because of our pain. You may have gone so far as to take out your pain on the people you care about the most. Family members, friends, other close ones, with the emotional dysregulation that accompanies CPTSD that I will talk about. You can be abusive to family members and even pets. I have certainly treated my father like shit many times over the years. I spoke before about how I alienated my twin flame. I'm the one who fucked that up. I fumbled a good one, and I lost the opportunity to find love in this life. I've had outbursts at my therapist. I am a nightmare neighbor and roommate. I'm alone for a reason. When I'm angry, you do not want to be in the same room with me. I can behave like a right royal piece of shit. What my therapist and my dad have put up with. Look, when you're in pain, physical or emotional pain, you are not a happy camper. Unless you're one of these Tony Robbins, no pain, no gain types. I mean, real pain. When you're really in pain, you are not the most pleasant person to be around. And we take it out on the people who are closest to us because they usually don't go anywhere. And again, you can extend yourself some self-compassion, forgive yourself, and apologize and try to make amends where possible. As a result of self-isolating, you may have become a shut-in, a loner, a recluse in your own self-imposed hermit mode. You may feel as though you have lost the ability to interact with other people. And this too is a very sad legacy of abuse. You lose the power of discernment and you start throwing the baby out with the bathwater. I've spoken also before about how back in the day I rejected perfectly good people, not only lovers but also friends, because I couldn't recognize them. They were like the conquistadors' ships on the horizon for the American Indians in the movie What the Bleep Do We Know? I couldn't see them. I didn't speak their language. I didn't speak the language of kindness. I spoke only the language of abuse, and abuse was the only thing that I could respond to. And I resorted to some shockingly rude ways to push other people away from me. I was like a wounded animal, like a rescue dog or cat. It will only bite, scratch, bark, growl, and hiss when you try to feed it because it can't distinguish between love and abuse. Avoiding behaviors extend also to yourself. You start disassociating from yourself because you don't want to feel anything. These are the self-avoiding behaviors that I've also spoken about previously. Self-avoidance is basically distraction, and these days, because of technology, the opportunities for distraction are innumerable. Social media, dating apps, gaming, doom scrolling, subscribing to every streaming service ever. You may have a literal addiction to clicking and scrolling and swiping. Not me, curling up every night with every Netflix reality dating competition in existence. But if Dom from Perfect Match is still available, girl, he can slide into my DMs anytime. Metaphorically speaking, of course. And there's a fine line between self-avoidance and self-abuse. Self-abuse is not just cutting. It can be. The behaviors we traditionally associate with self-abuse are self-harm, which is cutting or excoriation or skin picking, substance abuse, And substances can be legal, illegal, over-the-counter, or prescription. You can abuse cough syrup if you want to, and eating disorders. People who don't understand anything about eating disorders think it's just young girls looking at pictures of models in magazines. Yes, initially it can start like that. Eating disorders can originate as a superficial preoccupation with image, but it quickly becomes a coping mechanism because it's just another means of control. I can't control anything outside of myself, but I can control my own body. It's not true that eating disordered people don't eat. They do, and that gives them something to control. They create these elaborate rituals around food procurement, preparation, presentation, consumption, and elimination. It's something to plan their day around, and it's something to focus on besides the trauma. And starvation is actually a drug just like any other. Starvation can get you high AF. There's a reason almost every spiritual tradition in the world has a fasting practice. I'm not sure that starvation brings you closer to God, but it sure does make you feel good. When you first stop eating, there's an initial feeling of discomfort because you're hangry, but then your body shuts down and euphoria sets in. Starvation is actually the cheapest and most legal drug in existence. Once, when I was really eating disordered, I was driving on the freeway, and I distinctly remember thinking I should not be driving. I was so out of it, I felt drunk. And starvation is also just another way to basically not feel your feelings, because emotions, like memory, are stored in the physical body, and you can't feel them if you don't have a body. It's just another way to numb out. Also, because again, trauma is stored in the body, some people are so clogged up with trauma that they just can't fit any food in there. Because of the rituals that are almost always integral to eating disorders are correlated with OCD, which can be another manifestation of trauma. But people have access to a wide variety of self-abusive behaviors, having unprotected sex, having sex with people you don't like, let alone love, spending too much money, under or over exercising, emotional eating, eating too much sugar or processed food, sleeping too much, wasting time on devices. I could go on, but some of the worst self-abuse, in my opinion, is, again, cognitive. It's the negative self-talk. How do you talk to yourself? How many times a day do you call yourself stupid or every other name in the book, along with assorted, colorful expletives? Again, part of the function of abuse is to get you to carry on the abuser's work for them long after they have gone. The abusers have taken up free rent in your mind and become the screaming voices in your head. I know it doesn't feel like it, but self-sabotaging is basically a self-protective defense mechanism. It's a preemptive strike. You're going to beat everyone to the punch. You can't do anything to me that I can't do to myself. You can't hurt me worse than I hurt myself. You can't reject me because I'm going to reject you first. And if I have nothing in the first place, no one can ever take anything away from me. Again, I have been bullied by hundreds, not dozens, of people. No, that number is not an exaggeration. A lot of people have done some really nasty things to me, up to and including assaulting me, but no one has ever abused me worse than I abuse myself. In my research on CPTSD, what I also didn't find was regressive behaviors, returning to activities, places, things, food you liked as a child, revisiting the old neighborhood, driving or walking past the childhood home, poring over old family videos or photographs, listening to music or watching shows or movies you liked as a child. All of a sudden you're eating Lucky Charms for the first time in decades. I hope you don't play with dolls, unless of course you do, which that's really great and I'm really happy for you. Full disclosure, this is humiliating, but I have a lifelong habit of sleeping in my closet. When I was a child, I would hide in my closet to get away from my mother. There was a trunk in there, and I would pull it out and I would sleep behind it. And to this day, on days when my mental health is really in the shitter, I pull my futon mattress in there and I sleep in my closet. It's a self-soothing thing for me. Regressive behaviors are embarrassing, but I think that they are an attempt to connect with your inner child. I know that sounds so cliche, but one of the reasons you are in so much pain is that your inner child is in pain too. So if anyone wants to gaslight you as immature for doing things to take care of your inner child, well, their inner child is probably in pain too. And I think regression includes this concept of learned helplessness, which is this childlike false belief that you are powerless to do anything to change your situation. Children really don't have any power because they are 100% dependent upon their caretakers for their survival. In adulthood, however, when the trauma becomes too much for us to bear, we can revert to a fatalistic sense of powerlessness. This is my cross to bear. It doesn't get any better than this. I just can't do any better than this. Oh well. When you start with the self-blame, you attribute your situation to your mistakes, and you become so afraid of making the same mistakes that you just don't do anything. Your life devolves into stagnation, paralysis, and stagnancy of daily routine, just getting up and mindlessly doing the same shit over and over and over again. Here again, we see a problem with executive function. You may have lost the ability to make decisions for yourself. You may have to outsource all major life decisions to external third parties for validation. You wait for other people to give you the green light. This is not delegation, this is codependency. I'm to the point in my life where I can't so much as blow my nose without calling my father to ask for permission. The emotional manifestation of CPTSD can also be summarized by one word, and that's fear. Again, of both others and self. Bullies teach us fear. Certain external sensory stimuli, for example, things you see or hear, words or phrases that your bullies used, even times of day, are enough to strike terror into your heart, set your nervous system on high alert, and get your stress hormones pumping. In the past, whenever I was dumped by narcissists for a month or two after the breakup, I would be scared to death of cars that looked like theirs, the same color, make, and model. You may no longer be afraid of your original bullies, but you may have learned to be afraid of potential ones. You may find that you walk on eggshells, literally holding your breath around practically everyone you encounter, not just narcissists. God forbid you should ever do or say anything that would ever offend anyone or rub anyone the wrong way. I am crippled by fear just picking up my prescriptions at the pharmacy. Fear can lead us to engage in some pretty cringe, doormatty behavior. I've had a policy for a long time of always leaving a 20% tip, even for bad service, because I am so afraid of anyone ever getting upset with me. People with CPTSD carry around every negative emotion in the book. Hatred, rage, anger, depression, sadness, worry, anxiety, just everything bad, because it's been projected onto us. Sufferers with CPTSD in particular can present with a lot of irritability, which is symptomatic of depression. And that is exactly what abusers want. Again, the function of all abuse is to create in the victim the external reflection of the abuser's own internal reality. People have been projectile vomiting, offloading, and trauma dumping all of their unprocessed, unhealed, and dysregulated crap all over you because they're too weak, lazy, and stupid to deal with it themselves, and because they think you're their personal trash can. However, other people, especially in the workplace, may not characterize you as an emotional person because you're numbing yourself with those distractions that I mentioned. We've all been gaslit, criticized, blamed, shamed, ridiculed, mocked, made fun of, ostracized, rejected, isolated, shunned, snubbed within an inch of our lives for expressing our emotions. So we emotionally shut down. Again, you're detached, you're not present. People may call you cold, serious, uptight, especially if you are a woman, because again, heteronormative gender roles mandate that women be more emotional than men, while men are expected to stuff their feelings with that proverbial stiff upper lip and never express emotion because emotionality is conflated with femininity. But stuffing your feelings doesn't make them go away. So here we go again with that pendulum that swings between extremes that keeps showing up in my experience for some reason. When you repress your emotions, they have the potential to come out sideways, and here is where the emotional dysregulation comes in. It's like a pressure cooker. You may be prone to outbursts, or you may just be emotionally inappropriate, like angry or teary for no reason. As much as I hate the "you're too sensitive" gaslighting, when you have trauma, you actually are too sensitive. People with CPTSD exhibit a startle response, outsized overreactions and hypersensitivity to loud noises or to being surprised. For example, you are very easily spooked and you cry easily. You may cry at Hallmark commercials just because they want you to. And you may even be triggered by things completely unrelated to your unique experience. Let's say, for example, you've never witnessed a mass shooting, at least I hope you haven't, God forbid. But if you hear about a mass shooting on the news or you see one dramatized, it's enough to make you catatonic with fear. CPTSD also manifests in hypervigilance, which is what it's really all about. You can't relax. You're constantly on edge. Trauma of any kind forces us into survival mode, and survival is unsustainable. Your body cannot physically sustain that level of hyper alertness. Your system was not built to be flooded with stress hormones all the time. CPTSD is basically the crash that happens after an extended period of hypervigilance. Your nervous system is basically fried, shot to hell. It has lost its elasticity. That's why we see PTSD in our veterans. It's not just the horror of what they experienced in combat. It's the constant hyper-defensiveness that they have to maintain throughout their tours of duty. And it's the same for emergency room doctors and staff. When trauma gets bad enough, it's going to start affecting you physically. So the first and biggest physical symptom of CPTSD, I think, would have to be the fatigue. Oh my fucking God. You are so fucking tired. You're just exhausted all the time. And it's not an "I want to sleep" type thing. It's exhaustion on a soul level. I know what it's like to spend 13 hours in bed and still get up feeling as though I lost a UFC match. People with CPTSD already don't sleep well, but no amount of sleep in the world could ever remedy this level of exhaustion. It's basically low energy, like with depression. I believe Dr. Ramani calls it low bandwidth. You just don't have the energy to do what you want to do. After work, you just want to come home, DoorDash some pad thai, and pass out in a food coma. At this point in my life, I've gotten used to losing about 1 day a week. I can clean myself and my home. I take my shower and I do my cleaning for the day, but other than that, I just don't have energy for anything else. Why are you so tired? You are tired for multiple reasons. Let's review, class. Number 1, parasitic energy vampires are leeching your life force out of you. You're drained. And that's something you do have the power to address. Call back your energy. Retrieve and recall unto yourself all parts of yourself that have been lost along the way. It only takes a few minutes every night. Number 2, you're on the defensive. You feel as though you have to fight these people off all day. Again, defensiveness is not sustainable. It's like living in a war zone. It's exhausting. Number 3, you're masking. We've all been gaslit that our authentic selves are not acceptable because they threaten the egos of insecure people. So we learn to show up with a false self, a fake persona, and trying to do the job that you have been hired to do, all while working as a full-time actor for 9 hours a day, is also exhausting. Finally, you are being forced to emotionally labor. Even if you were hired in an intellectual profession and meeting other people's emotional needs is nowhere in your job description. If you were allowed to just do the job that they are paying you for, you would be fine. But no, it's all the power struggles and the mind games and the drama and the diaper changing and the bottle feeding and the bullshit that is a complete and total waste of everyone's time and energy, not to mention money and the earth's resources. Trauma also has the capacity to affect your sleep. In fact, I'm pretty sure that's the first thing that it affects. Either you have trouble falling asleep or you wake up in the middle of the night and it can take you as long as 4 hours to get back to sleep. On those rare occasions when you somehow manage to sleep through the night, you still don't feel refreshed. Again, not a STEM person, but I wonder if people with trauma are not getting enough slow wave or deep sleep, which can put them at an increased risk for dementia. You may not be able to remember the last time you got a good night's sleep. I can't. Your girl feel like ass. And you may have just given up and resigned yourself, again with learned helplessness, to walking around all the time feeling like death warmed over, like something the cat dragged in. Another major impact of CPTSD on physical health for me is digestive problems. There is a tremendous connection between the brain and the digestive system. The gut is called the seat of emotion. So this can look like IBS. You may gain weight from depression, or you may lose weight from anxiety. You may also get sick often, and by sick I mean flus and colds, or these days COVID. If you grew up in an abusive home, you were probably sick a lot. Because of my insurance, I was able to get a physical this year, and my doctor informed me that I have a vitamin D deficiency. In other words, I need some D. He's not wrong. Moving on. He also told me my immune system is basically no longer functioning at this point. I know the anti-vaxxers are going to swarm my channel and tell me it's because I got the jab. And because I work with a bunch of snot-nosed little germ carriers, I keep getting sick. One of the reasons I have not been posting as much this year is that I get sick every 2 months like clockwork. Because of my immune system malfunction, my doctor prescribed me the pneumonia vaccine, which in my country is not recommended until you're 65. Now, I'm old, but I'm not that old. But what have I been saying for years? Workplace bullying shaves years off your life. Narcissistic abuse is prematurely aging. This is kind of like the weathering phenomenon that we see in traditionally marginalized or oppressed communities who literally have a reduced life expectancy because of all the abuse they are subjected to in society. CPTSD can also result in bodily aches and pains because, again, trauma, like all memory, is stored in the physical body, not the brain. And it can get so bad that it starts to literally hurt. You may get headaches or migraines. Back pain is very common, especially in men, because understandably men store most of their body mass in their upper body. If you have chronic back pain, you have taken on some responsibility that does not belong to you. Ask yourself who put that on you and why you accepted it. In women, it can be the opposite because we tend to store more mass in our lower body. When I was younger, I used to experience discomfort in my calves when I was stressed, and no, I don't have cankles. At least I hope I don't. Pain may also manifest along your chakra system, which is not just some new age woo-woo. It does correlate to Western medical science. The chakras are energy centers along your spine that correspond to the glands in your endocrine system. What is called qi in traditional Chinese medicine is called prana in Ayurveda, and may very well correspond to lymph, which needs to flow, be balanced and clear, and not become stuck, stagnant, or blocked. And I have a Facebook post on that if you want to check it out. For years, I walked around with excruciating pain deep in my lower abdomen, kind of near my root chakra, which is kind of where the colon meets the rectum. It was this hard, dark energy cluster that I called my ball. Well, that was where my body decided to store my trauma. Trauma can also affect both appetite and libido. Again, it's an exercise in extremes. It has the capacity to dramatically increase or decrease appetite and libido. Depression depresses. You may be unable to eat, or you may be overeating because you need energy. You may be oversexed, or you may be abstinent. You may be unable to orgasm. I can already hear most of you like, that ain't me. That's not my problem. This is something that we see more typically in women, but a lot of men struggle with ED. What I think the inability to orgasm is a fear of loss of control. Again, we've all been gaslit for expressing our emotions. So we shut down emotionally and we shut down sexually too. And finally, unhealed trauma, if it goes on for long enough, can result in somatization, which is phantom, mysterious health conditions that cannot be traced to any discernible cause, like chronic fatigue, chronic pain, fibromyalgia, adrenal malfunction. It is my completely unscientific personal opinion that all health conditions, ranging from allergies to heart disease to cancer, are emotional in origin. But the traditional mainstream Western medical establishment remains reluctant to acknowledge the mind-body connection. If you go to a Western medical doctor for fibromyalgia, I guarantee you he will just write you a prescription for an antidepressant. And that's part of the gaslighting. It's all in your head. Some Western medicine is begrudgingly coming around and starting to acknowledge the health benefits of things like mindfulness meditation in our veterans hospitals, for example. And I've mentioned before that I'm not the only one who has noticed the prevalence of cancer among victims of narcissistic abuse. That is literally what Eckhart Tolle called the pain body. It is the physical manifestation of the negative energy that narcissistic abuse victims absorb because empaths are sponges. How did a 42-year-old woman with unparalleled access to arguably the best healthcare in the world get cancer? Would you like to explain that to the class? Could it be that she has been trying to survive in the most narcissistic family system in the world by stuffing her feelings with her stiff upper lip for the past 13 years? I ain't saying, but I'm just saying. I've also spoken before about how workplace bullies have their own trauma. Hurt people hurt people. Happy people don't bully. No genuinely happy person in the history of human civilization ever bullied anyone. It's like a law of physics. I think the difference here is that in non-narcissistic people with CPTSD, we don't see the sadism component. Workplace bullies are not just unhappy people who are having a bad day. It is this whole elaborate, calculated strategy that takes months of detailed, orchestrated plotting and planning to execute. It is premeditated, deliberate, intentional cruelty, and they enjoy it. and they feel no remorse. You're not like that. If you have trauma, yes, you may be emotionally dysregulated. You may have outbursts, meltdowns, and shutdowns. You may go so far as to take out your pain on other people, even people that you love. Doesn't make you a bully, because you have a conscience. What I do know about CPTSD is that it makes the bullying worse for multiple reasons. I've also been saying, ever since I started writing my essay on workplace bullying almost 10 years ago, can't believe it's been that long, that I disagree with the "it gets better" movement. It does not get better. In many ways, it gets worse. First, abuse and abusers teach you to show up in the world with fear. When you approach people with fear, they respond in kind. They're like horses who buck and throw you because they can sense your fear. Also, abuse is debilitating, mentally, psychologically, emotionally, even physically, and narcissists can only infiltrate you through your pre-existing weaknesses. They are like snipers who pick off the wounded animal at the edge of the herd. They are all weak and lazy cowards who want someone who is already damaged, because we are already doing half their work for them. Also, the diminished bandwidth, the low energy, and the forgetfulness may start to affect your work performance, which is going to invite overt bullying, yelling, screaming, and name-calling. And the dissociation really rubs narcissists the wrong way, because they demand your undivided attention at all times. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Workplace bullies want an engagement, and they want that engagement on an emotional level. If you are anything less than 100% emotionally engaged with them, they misinterpret your detachment as a rejection, and they feel personally offended and insulted, and they retaliate because they feel justified. You hurt them first. Finally, if you present with some kind of negative affect, anger, sadness, depression, it attracts bullying to you, because unfortunately it is human nature to kick a man when he's down. I'm not sure that's narcissism. Even non-narcissists do it. It may be a primitive way of thinning the herd by eliminating the weakest link. If I knew how to heal CPTSD, I'd be a lot richer than I am. As you know, I am not really a fan of traditional talk therapy. Again, human memory is stored in the tissues of the physical body, not the brain. And that is not some new age woo-woo that I'm inventing. Read the work of Dr. Joe Dispenza and other groundbreaking scientists. That's why, for example, people who receive organ donations start to have the memories of the donor. You can just Google that. Or you can watch the movie about it starring Jessica Alba, which, slay queen, we stand. And we also know that trauma has the capacity to actually mutate DNA. That's why we see certain protected classes in the world who seem to be reliving the same traumatic experiences over and over and over again, albeit slightly updated for each new era. They have intergenerational trauma. Your brain is a muscle that weighs about 3 pounds. I'm guessing you weigh a lot more than that. Sitting and talking about your problems on a cognitive level is never going to access the deep core programs running in your subconscious mind and stored in your body. People spend decades in therapy and make very little progress. I think the best therapy can offer is awareness. Oh, I married my mother. But knowledge is not power. And some of you have contacted me about therapists who gaslight you, and I believe you. My first therapist was a psychopath who broke the law several times by violating my confidentiality agreement. The profession of psychology attracts more crazy people than the general population. There are a lot of wounded healers. There are hoodwinks and charlatans in every profession. And finding a good therapist is a matter of trial and error. And most of you don't have that kind of money. For more meaningful change, I think it's better to focus on more body-based healing modalities like yoga, Tai Chi, Qigong, Reiki, acupuncture, even massage. Studies have definitely shown that one thing that is effective in treating PTSD is mindfulness meditation, but I think it requires an average of like 27 minutes a day, which I know can be daunting if you've never meditated before. So like everything in life, you just start small, baby steps, like 10 minutes a day, gradually increase from there. If you have difficulty meditating, try guided meditations, and there are plenty of free guided meditations available here on YouTube. There is also research into the effect of psychedelics in treating PTSD, namely LSD, MDMA, and psilocybin, all illegal in my area, not advocating for anything illegal, all allegedly for entertainment purposes only. Don't come for me, mama. Mama, don't come for me. Not speaking from personal experience, I have never tried any of these. I cannot even tolerate CBD products. Just last week, the US FDA shot down studies about the effect of MDMA on PTSD, and we all know why they did it. The FDA is paid off by Big Pharma. Go ahead and strike me. I don't care. I know it, you know it, we all know it. The FDA is very firmly in the pocket of Big Pharma, and if Big Pharma can't take its cut, it doesn't want it to exist. Still doesn't negate the overwhelming anecdotal evidence of people all over the world about the positive health repercussions of psychedelics on mental health struggles, ranging from just some marital problems all the way to the horrific trauma experienced by our veterans. And there are probably some psychedelics still in our earth that we don't even know about. Only the indigenous peoples of the world know about them, and I hope we never discover them, because greedy humans tend to monetize the shit out of everything. When we have trauma, we all wish we could just push the eternal sunshine reset button, wipe the slate clean, and start over again. But anyone who is peddling some kind of magical cure-all, a one-stop shop panacea for CPTSD, probably also has a bridge that they would like to sell you. Again, quacks in every profession. The first step to healing from CPTSD is to admit you're sick. You've been wounded. That gives absolutely nothing to your bullies. They're long gone. You don't care if they win the lottery or drop dead off the face of the earth. Fuck them. Healing is not a pill. It's a practice, and it may be something that you have to do for the rest of your life. But it doesn't necessarily have to be this big-ass deal. Maybe it's more like the Japanese practice of Kaizen, just small, minor changes to your daily routine that add up to a big impact. I do know that living with trauma is an utterly joyless experience. When you numb yourself, maybe you don't feel anything bad, but you don't feel anything good either. It's anhedonia. It's throwing the baby out with the bathwater. There is no color in this miserable, shitty life because it's not really living. I call it the limnus. It's a liminal state between living and not living. It's Hamlet's soliloquy. I don't really want to die, but I don't want to do this shit either. So we become the walking undead, on the fence with our ambivalence. So the question is, are you going to do this or not? I also know that this is not what God intended for us. The universe really wants you to step into life and participate in the experience, even if you get hurt. Just like the lotus flower grows in dirty water, but blossoms open to the sun's light. So for some of us, the choice right now is pretty black and white. Just change one thing today and see what happens. I hope that helps. Take care.